As human beings, we tend to hold certain beliefs that are meant to neatly explain things we don't understand and don't want to understand. It's easy for us to wrap our brains around an answer if it doesn't make us give up our worldview or challenge our level of consciousness. But this can also lead to very fundamental misconceptions about reality that end up cutting off our ability for higher awareness. And there is one misconception in particular that can lead to the biggest error in our ability to progress in our spiritual awakening. Today, I'm going to talk about the number one misconception that all of humanity shares, no matter whether they consider themselves spiritual or not, no matter what walk of life they come from. And then I'm going to share what the real issue is that is totally going unnoticed so that the viewer can deepen their understanding of reality during their spiritual awakening. As a collective, we believe that the cause of all of the issues in the world are because of greed. We so thoroughly believe that greed is the beginning, middle, and end to all of the woes in the world that it could almost be considered unanimous. Greed is viewed as the end-all be-all reason as to why humanity at large can't have nice things. It's a topic that gets brought up regularly throughout the collective, and especially in regards to the deterioration of our global conditions. It's easy to reach for greed to explain away the issues in the world because it's something that we can all relate to, even if we don't identify as being greedy ourselves. It's still conceivable because it's a well-known part of human nature. And if we can chalk this all up to human nature, then there's nothing more that needs examining, and we can carry on with our worldview intact. But greed is not the core reason to the problems in the world. Greed is the low-hanging fruit. It is a symptom, one of many, of a pathway that is rooted in annihilation. Think of existence as created by echoes of thought that ripple outward to project into form. These projections are animated into life as thought forms. So these thought forms manifest in this dimension as certain qualities that belong to that thought form, which they are from, and from which they are an echo of. You can think of these thought forms as different callings on our journey into the lower densities. The primary thought form that echoes out of existence is to be. And so that emanates everything that is included in being and in creation. To be is like saying yes to what is, which is consciousness. It is an open hand. It is aligned with what is. It contains everything and denies nothing. But by its very definition, if it truly does contain all, then it includes its very opposite as well. And that is the thought form not to be, or what is known as nonbeing. If being is an emanation of the thought yes, then the thought form non-being is an emanation of the thought no. And so it denies creation and seeks oblivion. It is entropic. It seeks to usurp, and its nature is annihilation. It is a closed fist, and it has a heavy gravity that pulls life into the sleep state of unconsciousness because it denies consciousness itself and the awareness of what is. So from being comes non-being. And between these forces of existence, life as we know it is comprised. These different pathways or choices we explore are called the names of God, because they are all the different faces of source consciousness. This means for every thought that is manifested within the thought form of being, there is an opposite thought for it to not be manifested, or more poetically put, not to be. So back to greed. Greed is an attribute of usurpation. And we have established that usurpation belongs to the thought form of non-being. We all have the capacity within us to be greedy, but that's not what I'm referring to here. All of us embody certain ratios for the affinity of being and for the affinity of non-being. Human nature is a mixed bag. So we are by no means one-dimensional. We carry all the colors of the rainbow and all of the different pathways of creation called to us, even though we do have certain affinities. For instance, empaths have an affinity with being, since they can heavily feel their connection to all of life, even though they still hold a ratio of non-being. So we contain all of the macrocosm within us, but if we are conscious of this fact, then we can also consciously choose what influences to align with. This also means when some of us came into this incarnation, they came in with a stronger affinity for non-being, as a choice on a soul level to be the embodiment of entropy, the manifestation of that thought form incarnate. So anti-creation incarnates into life, thus creating still within its denial. So if greed is not the issue, but rather a byproduct of metaphysical forces, then what is the real issue being played out here? And the real issue would be turmoil. The hidden stressor embedded into humanity is that turmoil is the source of nourishment for the expression of non-being, the same way that love is a source of nourishment for the expression of being. Point blank, our trauma and the turmoil that comes from it is food for some thought forms and their affiliates. If you'd like to know more about this topic, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video explaining this concept in far more depth. But the reason why it's important to understand this concept of being and non-being is because humanity continues to not recognize the deeper reality behind the turmoil in the world. And because we don't recognize the why, we continue to unconsciously cycle in the turmoil, being continuously re-traumatized, none the wiser to the deliberate design behind it all, while blaming everything on greed. Turmoil being a source of food for higher forces can sound completely bonkers unless you consider that all of creation receives sustenance from itself. We all gain energetic nourishment from our environment, and we are the microcosm to what the macrocosm is doing. The only question is it a symbiotic or parasitic form of sustenance? Is it interconnected or is it subversive? The opportunity and the challenge in the third dimension is to activate our spiritual discernment. Discernment is the most precious faculty and the most vital prerequisite to developing our intuitive gifts. It's what will allow us to navigate the many pitfalls during a spiritual awakening, and one of them is believing that money is what this is all about. To quote an exceptionally wise moment in one of the Batman remakes,
"Some men just want to watch the world burn."
This is about something much more fundamental than even money. It's about life force. This is about turmoil as a source of food. But the collective is not aware of this, and so we continue to project our humanity onto characters, events, and circumstances that have an altogether different nature. The more closed off you are to being, to what is, the more constricted of a channel your energy field is until it becomes a closed fist. It cannot run life force through it, so it takes by force. It needs more, and it needs more of a violent nature because it is not an efficient conduit. Now, imagine you are expanded and the channels in your energy field are not constricted. You have a primordial willingness to know truth, consciousness, and therefore love. You have an openness to what is, which generates a stronger conduit to your core essence as a creator being. This is why when we begin to heal, things that feed us change. We have changed our taste buds for pain. Keep in mind that these emanations are only being played out in the lower densities of this universe. Because, you see, non-being can't go any higher than the fourth dimension. You can only go out of alignment with creation so far until you can't go any further, because that thought form is self-annihilating. Like a snake eating its own tail, and not in the good way. That pathway leads to the eventual consumption of even itself, because it does not understand that it's connected to creation. Its very expression comes from a space of disconnection. But because disconnect is not actually what is, this pathway cannot proceed any higher than the fourth dimension, because it is not an expansive thought in existence. It is a thought rooted in denial. It's not in resonance with the ultimate reality of love and consciousness, so despite its best efforts, it cannot usurp being. It can only balance creation by negating. But what it can do is pull us into sleep states of consciousness by distorting our ability to discern. Distorting the field of reality through confusion, gaslighting, and other means still keeps our free will intact, but makes it easier for us to willingly choose illusion over what is, thus keeping us in the state of ignorance, better known as evil. That's why the third dimension is where the stakes are the highest, because we have the most free will here. Should we choose to awaken, the universe will always provide the next step, even if we don't have 2 pennies to rub together. Despite all outward appearance, the universe will always devoutly support our evolution. And should we choose to stare at shadows on the cave wall, incurring karma for the ignorance we breed, the universe will not love us any less, but we might suffer. I hope this has helped your journey in some capacity. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakenings. Thank you and see you next time.